Hello and welcome to Earth to Aura Foundations, your free guide to some basics in gemmology and crystal healing. My name is Candice Hamilton and I'm the founder and creator of Self and Others, a crystal and wellness lifestyle brand here in the UK. I'm also a certified gemmologist through the Gemmological Association of Great Britain, or GEMA for short. I'm so glad that you're here and I'm so excited to share all this amazing information with you. So let's not waste any more time and dive straight in. In this video, we're going to cover some gemmological aspects like what gemmology is, what minerals, crystals, rocks, and gemstones are, health and safety, natural versus synthetic, as well as some common treatments seen in the industry. We're also going to take a look at what crystal healing is, how to choose crystals, the different shapes and sizes, cleansing and charging, and I'm going to give you 5 of my top crystals that everyone should have in their kit or that are perfect if you're just starting out on your crystal journey. At the end, I have a little ethics exercise, as well as touching on supply chain considerations. Now, gemmology can sometimes get confused with geology quite a bit, and it is a niche within mineralogy that is a branch of geology. Now, gemmology is the science and study of gemstones at its simplest form, and gemmologists are trained and qualified to be able to identify and evaluate gems, be able to say whether they are natural or artificial, and in some cases identify any treatments. On the other side of this, we have crystal healing, and this is an alternative therapy that uses crystals and gemstones to promote physical and emotional as well as spiritual wellness or well-being and healing. And the idea behind this is that different crystals have different energy signatures and unique properties that we can draw on to restore balance and harmony within our mind, body, and spirit. So what exactly is the difference between a mineral, rock, crystal, and gemstone? So in order for something to be classified as a mineral, it has to meet 3 criteria. The first one is that it has to be naturally occurring. So this means it cannot be man-made. It also has to be inorganic, so no living organism should be used in its creation. And lastly, it has to be crystalline or crystalline, depending on how you like to pronounce it. And this means it has to have a crystal lattice. Now, crystals are normally what we refer to in the different habits or shapes that they grow into. But minerals are crystals because crystals by definition need to have a regular repeating arrangement of atoms, ions, or molecules. So this is the crystal lattice. But sometimes not all crystals can be minerals. So if there are organic crystals, then they cannot be classified as a mineral. Then we have rocks. Now, rocks are an aggregate of minerals and other materials. So this means that they're made up of one or more minerals. And sometimes they can include organic matter or volcanic glass as examples. And you may remember from high school, these are classified into how they're formed. So that you're either going to get sedimentary, igneous, or metamorphic rocks. So a really nice example is obsidian. This is an igneous rock, it's volcanic glass, or even lapis, which contains 3 minerals or crystals, which is lazurite, pyrite, and calcite, which form together. Then we have gemstones. Now, gemstones are predominantly minerals that are prized for their beauty, rarity, and durability. Now, not all minerals are gemstones because they might not be as rare, for example, but most gemstones are going to be minerals. We do have some rocks that we constitute as gemstones. So, for example, obsidian and lapis are rocks that are gemstones. There are also some organic materials that we consider gemstones. So these are produced by living organisms. So if you think about amber, jet, and pearl, these are all organic materials. And also there are some materials that are amorphous. So these are materials that don't have a crystal lattice or a crystalline structure. So if you think about opal, that is an inorganic amorphous material that we consider a gemstone. You also have pearl, which is an organic amorphous material that we consider a gemstone. And then a side note that synthetic materials or some artificial materials we also consider gemstones as well. Now, when it comes to shapes and sizes, most of the crystals and gemstones you're going to find on the market are going to be either rough or polished. I think both of these are perfectly fine to use. They're perfectly effective. I personally love natural rough material. And I think if you are a bit more sensitive to crystal energy, then maybe polished can be a little more helpful for you. But sometimes we do need to polish material to see their beautiful optical effect. So if you think about labradorite, for example, has a beautiful iridescent color that you're going to appreciate a lot more when that material has been polished. When it comes to the different shapes, I've only covered 8 here, 8 shapes here. They do come in a few more different options, but I think these are probably going to be the most common ones that you see. So natural points, of course, are natural. They occur naturally in nature. They are unaltered, and they are really great for directing energy to or away from the body. You also get double terminated crystals. So if you think about your Herkimer quartz or your Herkimer style quartz or your Herkimer diamonds, these are natural double terminated crystals. So they can disperse the energy in and out of the crystal in 2 directions. We then have clusters, and clusters are a bunch of natural points that have grown together from a single base, and these will disperse energy in different directions as well as amplify energy. Geodes, you can think of clusters that have grown into a hollow cavern-like shape, and these are formed in hydrothermal deposits. So a cavity has been filled with mineral-rich water that is very hot, and it cools very slowly, forming these crystals. We then have tumbles, which is a favorite of mine. They are affordable, durable, and incredibly convenient, and they're great for traveling and keeping around with you in your bags or your pockets, and you can make grids and elixirs with them as well. Generator points or polished points work very similar or the same as natural points. However, these are really great if the crystal that you want to use doesn't grow in a natural point. So obsidian doesn't grow in a natural point, so perhaps you want to have it polished into a point so you can use it to direct its energy. We then have spheres, and these are polished, and these will emit energy equally all around and in all directions. This is really great if you want to put this into a space that maybe gets a lot of traffic, but sometimes these are just really nice to hold as well. We then have pyramids, and these have the largest surface to volume ratio and is an incredibly stable shape, and this will emit energy upwards towards the universe. We then have cubes, very much like the pyramid, is a stable shape. I kind of think of these as boxes that hold on to your intentions, so that's one way you can look at it. A question I get asked a lot is, does size matter? Do the size of my crystals matter? And the answer to that is really, it depends. And it depends largely on the intention that you have for it. If you are looking to clear a large living room space, tumbles are just not going to cut that. So you're better off having a large sphere, cluster, or even a large geode in that space, which is going to serve your purpose and your intention much better than a smaller crystal would. So how do we choose our crystals? Now, when I was learning about crystals, I was very overwhelmed, and I find, or at least I found, categorizing them into these 8 different color boxes helped me to figure out at least where to start and to give me a starting point or a springboard for which I can then explore other crystals. Now, white and colorless crystals tend to be associated with the crown energy center, and will usually be good for clarity, calm, purity, cleansing, and mindfulness. Pink crystals typically are good for love, and it could be friendships or romantic relationships, kindness, forgiveness, compassion, and will sit with the heart energy center. Red would typically be good for the root energy center and for things like passion, courage, stability, strength, and energy. Amber, which includes gold, silver, and orange crystals as well. These will cross the sacral and solar plexus energy centers and typically be good for manifestation, joy, courage, confidence, success, and creativity. Green for the heart energy center for personal growth, prosperity, new beginnings, luck. Green will cross over with pink quite a bit because it's the heart energy center. So, emerald will also be really good for relationships. But you'll notice that pink and green crystals also grow together. So when you think about unakite or you think about pink and green tourmaline, so these are very connected crystals. Blue is usually for the throat energy center for things like communication, self-expression, productivity, and focus. Indigo for intuition, dreams, sleep, psychic abilities, anti-anxiety or calm. And this usually connects with the third eye energy center. And last, but certainly not least, is black, sometimes gray and brown crystals as well. And these will be for the root energy center for protection, grounding, transmuting energy, also detoxifying as well. So hopefully this gives you a good starting point. It's not a perfect science because some will cross over, but at least this gives you somewhere where you can start. You can also choose crystals by feeling. So this will involve holding the crystal and paying attention to how it makes you feel. Now this is a personal process and it will require some practice and some patience and trusting your intuition. Now you might experience a tingling sensation or maybe some warmth or a overall sense of resonance or alignment with a particular part of your body. It's going to be different for everyone. So if you don't get a tingling sensation, it doesn't mean that it's not working for you. You could be experiencing something completely different. So trust your intuition and experiment a little bit. And lastly is choosing crystals by need. So you can, many websites, including my own, will have something like a crystal index where you can see a long list of needs like prosperity, abundance, acceptance, kindness, and so on. And it will list out some crystals that will be good for that particular need or intention. And then you can browse those crystals and see if they match up or you have some kind of resonance or alignment with them. Crystal care. So how do we look after our crystals? And I want to start with just some health and safety. So crystals contain elements and chemicals, and very often when we hear the word chemical, we get a little bit scared. But salt is a chemical, water is a chemical, and many of it is completely safe, while others are not safe. And it's the exact same with crystals. So I've just called out 4 here in particular. Malachite has copper in it, and normally this is totally fine, particularly when it's polished to handle. But rough specimens, you do just want to wash your hands. I wouldn't put any crystals in water directly for elixirs because we just don't know what's on them. We don't know their exact composition, and we wouldn't want copper to leach out into the water for you to ingest that and become unwell. Materials like galena and cinnabar have lead and mercury, which are poisonous to us. You definitely don't want to get lead poisoning. If you have rough galena specimens, you do want to rinse your hands afterwards and not touch your eyes and your mouth. Tiger's eye gets a bad rap for saying that it has asbestos, but this is a silica replacement material, so the asbestos has to be replaced by quartz in order for it to become tiger's eye. So there's no asbestos in there that is hazardous or dangerous. When you're handling polished forms of tiger's eye, it is completely safe. But again, in any situation, I would just avoid putting any crystals in water, particularly shungite as well. I know noble or elite shungite is very very common option to make elixirs from, but again, we don't know what's in these materials and they could make you ill. So let's talk a little bit about some external factors that could damage our crystals. The first one is sunlight. So this is the ultraviolet light that comes from the sun. And some materials are sensitive to this, and their color centers could get altered or destroyed, or the trace elements in the material can change how light interacts with it and change the color. So you definitely don't want to put some materials out in the sunlight. Some examples of this are rose quartz, amethyst, and kunzite. Other materials don't really like being put near or in water or being kept in environments with high humidity. So halite is a salt crystal. So obviously if you pop this in your bath, it's going to dissolve. But if you have a really humid environment, it is going to change the luster and perhaps not make it as stable. Pyrite is an iron-based material, much like galena and hematite. So like with a lot of metals, these can rust or dull over time. And selenite isn't going to dissolve immediately when you cleanse it in water. You can cleanse it in water. But if you leave it in for a long time or you do it too much, over time that luster is going to become very, very dull. And you could kind of reduce the stability of that material. And then we have heat. So in some cases, materials like amber can melt in extreme heat because it is a resin. When a material is heated, it expands and it can cause fractures if there's a weakness. It can also dehydrate some materials. So if you think about those opals that you have to keep in water, when you remove them from water, they craze and they get these cracks in them when they dehydrate. So there are some materials that you definitely just want to make sure that they either stay hydrated or they stay away from high temperatures. And then I want to chat a little bit about durability from a gemmological perspective. Now, durability consists of hardness, toughness, and stability. You may have heard of the Mohs hardness scale, which is an external durability property, and that tells us how resistant a material is to scratching and abrasion. Toughness tells us how, in terms of a material's ability to fracture and cleave. And then we have stability, which is a material's resistance to change. So if we take a piece of amethyst and a beautiful piece of coral, and we pour some bleach on them, the amethyst will come out in totally fine. It's very stable, whereas a piece of coral is not very stable and the bleach will completely remove the color from your coral. Another question I get asked a lot is, can I store my crystals together? So spiritually, absolutely yes. If you think about all the crystal stores out there, of course they store all of their crystals together. That's not a problem. It's not going to alter its inherent energy signature. However, the energies will mix together. So when you are working with multiple crystals in grids or wearing multiple bracelets, do take into consideration the different types of energy. Ideally, you want to amplify or complement each other. You do not want to mix crystals that are going to counter each other and might give you a result you weren't really planning for. From a physical perspective, you can store most of them together, but you do just want to take how fragile or brittle the material is. So when you think about those durability properties we talked about and how quickly it can scratch or chip or break, then you might want to store different crystals on their own. And you can do that with little bags, floating frames, which are available on the website, or even just getting little boxes with little dividers that you can separate them and make sure that they're not bumping into each other or knocking into each other. Or if you wanted to stack them on your tables, you can get these glass cases. I think these were available at H&M at some point. And then if you wanted to group your crystals by color as well into a little container, I think that's a really great option too. All right, cleansing and charging our crystals. I do have a free PDF download on the website for the cleansing guide. So if you just search for cleansing guide on the website, it should come up. But what is cleansing and charging? So cleansing is essentially clearing your crystal of energetic debris. Much like we take showers ourselves and wash our clothes and clean our houses, we clean our crystals too. And I think this really provides them with an optimal state to receive the intentions that you place in them and allowing them to work at their best. Charging for me is completely optional, and I see it as adding additional energy into your crystal so that they can work with a little more vibrancy. So it's kind of like increasing the intensity of the intention that you place into it. I don't believe that if you don't charge your crystal, they suddenly lose their inherent energy signature and they don't work anymore and they forget who they are. I don't believe that. I just believe that charging just dials it up a little bit more. And I would say just to make sure that you're always cleansing your crystals first before you charge them. And the ways that you can cleanse them, I've broken them out by the 4 different elements. I personally love mixing and matching elements and celestial bodies and zodiac together in colors. So this is a really nice way to maybe use a type of cleansing that aligns with the type of energy associated with your crystal. So, for a fire crystal, maybe you've got a pyrite, which will be a great option to cleanse with a fire element, and then also to charge in the sun. Those would be a good match in my mind. I personally like to use a sound bar to cleanse my crystals, but most people will use a combination of water or incense and sage. And then between the 2 celestial bodies to charge your crystals, you can have the sun as the moon as your 2 different energy types. So the moon for receptive or a more feminine energy, and the sun for a more projective or masculine energy. So each crystal will have a projective or receptive energy attached to it, or a zodiac or a color or an element. So you can match these up to kind of really enhance and elevate your practice. What I would say as well is just, again, remember the sun can fade some crystals, so just be careful which ones you do put in the sun. And I think the moon is really great if you've got a little calendar to check the different moon phases, the full moon and new moon. I do have that as a free download on the site as well for 2024 at the time of this video, and I'm sure I will do new ones for the upcoming years as well. So using our crystals, we have our crystals, we've got our shapes, and we've cleansed them, and how do we use them now? I think the most common way that people will use them is wearing them as jewelry, and I think this is a really great way to keep it close to you, especially when you're traveling. You can use them in your meditation to either get to know your crystals a little bit better or to enhance your meditation experience. If you are looking to try something a little bit different, you can try some gridding, and this is a really great way to mix complementary energies together that can affect a space or a situation. And then you've got altars. This is a favorite of mine because you can mix botanicals and crystals and candles and other little trinkets together to create a little space. So if spring is coming up, you can create a spring altar that you can decorate over the spring season. And then we've talked a little bit about elixirs. So water can hold and transport energy, so you can kind of infuse your water with crystal energy, but I would recommend using the indirect method, so either putting crystals around or underneath your water, or doing like a bain-marie where you put your crystals in one container and then that container goes into the container with the water in, and then you can leave that overnight under the moon as well, or in the sun, and let those energies diffuse into the water, or infuse, shall I say. And then using crystals around the home. So you can place crystals in your entrances and hallways. I have selenite and black tourmaline on the top of my doorways to cleanse and protect the energy coming in and out of my space. You can also consider putting crystals in the living room. So maybe you want to put some nice clear quartz clusters or apophyllite clusters to just bring a joyful, uplifting energy to your space. The bathroom is a fantastic place to have your crystals. So this is a cleansing space for recharging and rejuvenation. And then, of course, the kitchen, which is a bit of a social hub. And I think this is also, much like the living room, a really great place to kind of infuse it with some joyful, uplifting energy as well. And you also want to consider, it's a place for eating, drinking, homework, so perhaps, productivity or communication, relationships and health as well. We then have the office or the studio. So you might want to infuse your space with crystals related to intellect, creativity, communication, productivity. And then the bedroom, which is a place for rest and relaxation. It's also a space for dreaming and sleep and intimacy. So you can definitely consider having some crystals next to your bed, under your pillow, or even under your mattress. And then children's rooms, so we can use them to create a warm, safe, nurturing space. Again, from the health and safety element, you don't want crystals that are too small, especially if you have small children. And you don't want to use any crystals like galenas and cinnabars or rough malachite in children's rooms, just from that health and safety aspect. And of course, we can take crystals with us when we're traveling. Perhaps we have a fear of flying or we're a little bit nervous. So you can pop these in your luggage for protection, or wear jewelry or carry tumblestones around with you as well. Okay, real versus fake crystals. Now, I do want to caveat this section. In Gemmology, we don't use words real, fake, and genuine because they are very problematic and very misleading, and they don't really tell us what we need to know. But I fully understand that it is commonly used in everyday language. I did write an article about what you can say instead, and I'll cover some of these in the next few slides. But it is much better to use words like natural or artificial. This is a much more accurate way of describing our material. So materials can fall into a number of categories. The first one is natural. So when we say a material is natural, it means that this material formed naturally by Mother Nature. So geologically it formed without human intervention. And these materials can be organic or inorganic. So it can be like the opals and jats and moldavites of the world, or the diamonds or the corundums or pyrites of the world. So any material that grew naturally by Mother Nature, geologically, without human intervention, is a natural material. Now, artificial has some subsections, which I'm going to cover. And artificial is just that, it's the opposite of natural. So it is not made naturally or naturally formed, but it is man-made or man-altered in a way. And I'll give you some examples. And this can include gem materials themselves or color varieties. So creating a color of a material that doesn't exist naturally in nature. So if you take Siberian blue quartz, this bright cobalt blue quartz does not exist naturally in nature or in crystal form. You can get a blue crystalline quartz, but it doesn't look like this color. So this is a synthetic quartz produced in a lab with a color that doesn't exist in nature. We then have synthetic, which is a type of artificial material. And this is material produced in a lab or a factory, but synthetics have the same composition, structure, and physical properties as a natural, inorganic, mineral counterpart. Now, that is a lot of words, but a perfect example here are lab-grown diamonds or synthetic diamonds. So this is why we don't use real and fake, because a synthetic lab-grown diamond is a real diamond. It's made of carbon, it has a crystal structure, it has the same physical properties and structure as a natural diamond. It's difficult to tell them apart. So that's one of the reasons why we don't use real, because it actually doesn't tell us the difference between these two diamonds. We then have imitation, which is a type of artificial material, and these are materials. Now I say artificial, but this is kind of what you might classify as fake material. Now, these are materials that can be natural or synthetic, but they're used to simulate or impersonate another material. And that material can be natural or artificial. So these might not necessarily they might have similar colors or optical effects, but they don't have the same chemical nature and physical properties. So in this example, I have tanzanite and iolite. Tanzanite is more valuable, more rare, but you have iolite that looks very, very similar to tanzanite. So in some cases, people will mislead buyers and sell you an iolite, but they're telling you that you are buying tanzanite. So this would be a scenario of an imitation material, because chemically there are completely different minerals. And then there are composite materials. So these are materials that are assembled artificially from two or more natural, synthetic, or artificial components in such a way that they look like a single item. And a typical example here would be a triplet or a doublet, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail with an example with opal. So this is a natural precious opal that formed in nature. It's just been polished by man, but that doesn't change how it was formed. It's still considered natural. We then have a Gilson opal, which is a synthetic opal. So this has the same it doesn't have a crystal structure, but it's the same composition and amorphous material as a natural opal. So it's a real opal. We then have opalite, which you can consider an imitation. So this is man-made glass. It's formed in a lab, but it has like a similar milkiness and iridescent color to an opal. And the name opal in opalite might suggest that it's a variety or a type of opal, when it's not. It's got a completely different composition. It's not an opal, but it kind of sounds like it's an opal. So this could be quite misleading. And then we have an opal triplet. So a triplet has 3 layers, a doublet has 2 layers. And this material is composed of the dark base, which can be a wood, a plastic, a piece of obsidian, and then you've got a piece of opal in the middle. And this opal could be a natural precious opal. It could be a Gilson synthetic opal. And then you've got the colorless part, which is a dome shape on top. And this could be a resin or plastic or glass or clear quartz. And those 3 layers get sandwiched together and they get polished into a cabochon. So when you see it from the top, it looks like a solid opal, and especially when these are put into closed back bezel or rub over settings in jewelry, you can't see it from the side, and it's really, really hard to tell if you've got yourself a solid opal in there or not. Okay, common treatments. This is one of my favorite things, but before we go into some of the common treatments in the spiritual and wellness industry, I want to talk about why we treat gemstones to begin with. So gem materials have 3 reasons why they would be treated. And one is to improve their clarity, to improve their color, or their durability, or a combination of these. Now, topaz, for example, is a stone that gets heated quite a lot. Citrine gets heated quite a lot, sometimes irradiated, because it just makes them look better, or it's really hard to get this material naturally in nature. So we help it along a little bit and heat them to produce different colors. Now, these are modifications to material or enhancements to material, and these are artificially improving or altering the appearance or the properties. Because of that, treatments should always be disclosed. So particularly if you are a member of an organization like GEMA, and you have a paid up membership with them, you have to follow a code of practice, which states at the point of sale, you have to disclose all treatments to buyers, for example. You cannot mislead or intentionally not tell somebody that a material has been treated. So it actually goes against a like a code of ethics or a code of practice that gemologists who are members of these organizations have to abide by. Now, in the spiritual community, they don't have any of these kind of codes of practice to abide by. So many people are not experienced and don't actually know that they're selling materials that have been CVD treatment, irradiated, diffused, etc., etc. So it's unfortunately, you could be buying something that has been treated and you just don't know it. Also, there are a lot of materials that are treated because they can sell them at a higher value, particularly low-grade materials. And they kind of use different names to try and make them sound a little bit more spiritual and magical when unfortunately they are not. And I'm going to use this as my first example, which is a CVD treatment or chemical vapor deposition. Now you may know this as an aura coating, and you can tell already which one sounds more spiritual. Does an aura coating sound more magical and mystical and spiritual, or does chemical vapor deposition sound spiritual, right? It absolutely doesn't. So many of these quartz are unfortunately low-grade quartz that they can't sell. They pop these in a vacuum chamber, and minerals like titanium or gold will get deposited onto it, and it creates this permanent layer on the crystals that, you can't remove it. And I think this just kind of muffles the energy of the crystal. I personally am not a fan of CVD treatment, and I don't sell any of these in the store. You can identify these from an iridescent, this iridescent color on the external or the outside of the crystal, not on the inside. And you can see it goes around the whole crystal. There's nowhere where you can't see it, really. And it's anything that has aura in the name, where it's aura quartz, aqua aura, flame aura. There are so many different auras out there. They've all had this treatment done. The two stones in the middle have additionally been dyed to get that saturated blue color and that like pink and purple color, because you don't get those combinations naturally with quartz. But from a more gemmological perspective, mystic topaz is probably the most common material that gets a CVD treatment. You can actually produce diamonds with CVD treatment as well, but I'm talking in this case as a sort of, I don't want to call it an enhancement. This is a treatment that is applied. We then have dyeing and chemical coloration. Now, starting off with these agate slices, anytime you see these super saturated colors, it's been dyed. Natural agate slices look like those at the bottom, which I personally think are much more soothing and calming than these bright garish colors, which I think carry a completely different energy to them. They're not intended to be that way. If you love how they look, that's absolutely fine. For me personally, and in my store, I wouldn't sell anything that is dyed, especially to this level. We then have dyed howlite. So this is sometimes sold as an imitation material called turquoise or turquoise. Turquoise is a completely separate mineral. It's very expensive and rare, which is why people will take howlite and dye it blue and then try to pass it off as turquoise. We have Dalmatian jasper, which I've realized I've spelled incorrectly, but very often at the bottom is what a natural Dalmatian jasper looks like, and they will also dye them these various different colors. And the next one is one of my favorites. So at the bottom we have a beautiful natural citrine crystal from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The top one is a dyed quartz, and this I found on eBay being sold as a natural citrine for about $100. And that is of course absolutely not and what a natural citrine should look like. Now we have heat treatments and irradiation, and these are two different treatments, but I've put them together on here because these tend to work together when changing the color of materials. And I'm going to use clear quartz or rock crystal as an example, as I think this is a really, really great example. Now, if you take your clear quartz, particularly, so clear quartz in its colorless form, like that's its purest form. When iron enters its composition as a trace element or an impurity, and you apply gamma irradiation to it, whether naturally or artificially, it's going to turn that clear quartz into amethyst, which is the purple variety of crystalline quartz. Then, if we take that amethyst and we then decide to heat it up to roughly between 400 and 500 degrees Celsius, now this is going to depend on the iron in the material. There's different types of iron, so to speak, and it's going to give you a different result depending on that iron, which is a much more deeper, complex subject. But if we heat it to about 400 to 500 degrees Celsius, you're going to get prasiolite. Now, there is, I think, only one deposit found in the world that produces natural green crystalline quartz. However, unfortunately, most of the material, the green quartz you find on the market is heat-treated amethyst to produce prasiolite. This is also sold as green amethyst or mint amethyst, but just know that it is artificially produced. If we take our amethyst that has the other type of iron in it, and we also heat that to around 400 to 500 degrees Celsius, it's going to give us a slightly different result, and that is going to produce citrine for us, which is the yellow to orange or orange-brown variety of crystalline quartz. If we take our amethyst and we heat that to 350 to 450 degrees, so if we leave it in the sun sometimes, this is the same concept, it fades it and it destroys those color centers. So actually you can convert your amethyst back to clear quartz under the right conditions, but that's what happens when you leave your amethyst in the sun for too long. It goes back to being clear quartz. Now, very much like we had iron bearing quartz, you can get aluminium bearing quartz as well. So instead of iron, you've got aluminium as a trace element or an impurity in your crystal, and whether naturally or artificially you apply gamma irradiation, it's also going to produce citrine. Now these citrines typically have, you can kind of see them from a chartreuse kind of color, which I'll get to in a second. But natural citrine and heat-treated citrine artificially. So the one on the left has been artificially heat-treated, which is that very strong saturated color that has the white base at the bottom. We typically know citrine as being a pale color, but it can be orange naturally in nature. It's called a Madeira citrine. But again, these are very rare and very pricey. So most of the time, these have been heat-treated or irradiated. We can also get smoky quartz from the gamma irradiation. And we can also get Morian, which is the very dark brown, black, opaque variety of crystalline quartz. It's very, very black. Now, if our Morian is rich in lithium, and we heat it to about 140 to 280 degrees Celsius, it's going to produce lemon quartz or oro verde quartz, which is also called green gold. And this is that chartreuse kind of color. So this will sometimes be called citrine as well, but you can usually tell from the irradiation. Again, this irradiation could be natural or artificial. Most of the time it's artificial. But it has that greenish kind of undertone to it. And then if the Morian doesn't have a lot of lithium in it and we heat it to 140 to 280 degrees, it will produce a smoky quartz. So you can see that this can get really, really interesting and also really complicated in how irradiation and heat can completely alter one single type of material or one single mineral. So, why am I telling you all of this stuff? Well, sadly, the industry are filled with some people who are just trying to make a quick buck. They just want to sell you stuff and they don't really care about much else. So what I hope to do with this video is to provide you with a lot of information so that you know what to look out for when you're buying crystals, and so that you don't get duped. I've been duped before, which is what inspired me a lot to kind of get my gemology education and do these kinds of videos. It's not a great feeling, and I don't want you to have that feeling. I also want to give you the right vocabulary, so the right words to use, so that when you're shopping for crystals, you know what to ask for, and you have the education and the confidence to ask about treatments and not be afraid to say, hey, has this been heated or irradiated, or what can you tell me about where this material comes from? So I just want to arm you with as much ammunition as you can out into this wild, crazy industry that we have. Which leads me on to the ethics and sourcing part. Now, we hear ethics quite a lot and ethically sourced crystals and things like that, but what does it really mean? So ethics is a topic within philosophy, and it's broad, it's complex, but it's really about what is morally good and bad. So what is right and wrong, right? And this is going to mean different things to different people based on where we grew up in the world, our religious beliefs, our cultural backgrounds. We're all going to have a different position on what we deem is good and bad and right and wrong, right? And what my job is as a retailer is to provide you with enough information that you can make a purchasing decision that sits comfortably and aligns with your own moral compass. Just because somebody says that they're ethically sourced, it doesn't, I still have lapis on my site, right? And we have to consider that Afghanistan is the biggest producer of lapis, and they are currently controlled by the Taliban. So you have to consider whether you're going to be purchasing lapis just because of what's happening politically in the world. I have put here the ethical trading statement. I do have an ethical trading statement on my website that if you are interested in reading more about it, you can do so. And now I have a little ethics exercise for you to help explain ethics with 3 different outcomes in this scenario based on your moral compass. So I'm sure we've all been on Instagram and we've seen these crystal live sales, and you decide, you're scrolling through and you see this live sale and you see this amazing purple crystal that you've never seen before, and you're like, wow, these are amazing, I absolutely want these. What is it? I've never seen this before. And you find out from this live that this is a material called charoite. Great, amazing. Now from here, you could just buy it on the live sale and not think too much about it because you're not really interested in ethics, and that's totally fine. Happy days, I've got my charoite, I feel great. Now, perhaps you're not so sure, and you decide that you're going to jump onto Google and you're going to search charoite and figure out what is this material, where does it come from, what's it made of? And in your research, you discover that the only country in the world that produces charoite is Russia. Now, if you have been living under a rock, hopefully you haven't, you will know that there is currently a war happening between Russia and Ukraine. Now, you could decide, okay, I need to find out from the seller more information about this because I don't feel so good about that. So depending on the seller and how much information they have about their suppliers and their products, they could just come back and say, sorry, I don't know anything about this. I don't know where this charoite came from. Maybe it's Russia. I don't know. And from here, you could decide that's not good enough for me. That's not good enough information for me to make a decision as to whether I'm okay with purchasing this. And you could just say, I'm out, see you later. However, your seller might be a little bit more knowledgeable and maybe has some personal relationships with their suppliers, and they come back to you and they say, hey, this charoite, yes, it does come from Russia, and I'm fully aware that there's a conflict there at the moment. However, this material is mined by a young family. They have 2 children, and this is their only source of income in war. And this is the only way that they can feed their children, put food on the table and send their kids to school. Now, from here, you could separate the supplier from the conflict, and say, you know what, I'm actually okay with that. I'm okay with, supporting this young family because they're in a difficult situation. You don't know, though, if this family supports Putin. Does that align? Does that change how you feel about purchasing this material? And it would be completely inappropriate to ask somebody's political affiliation to decide whether you're going to purchase from them. So you may never get that information, and you have to make a decision as to whether you could be purchasing something that is ultimately funding a war or a terrorist organization or something else like that. So you can see it gets very complicated and tricky. And it's going to be different for everybody. Even if you drive a Tesla or you have an Apple phone, there's cobalt in those, and lithium. There's cobalt in Teslas. There's lithium in your phone batteries. The conditions of which this is mined is not ethical. So, you could be totally fine. Nobody goes into, the Apple store asking for an ethically sourced lithium battery in their phone. But arguably the mining conditions for lithium is far worse than your charoite. So I think it's just about getting familiar with what's going on in the world, and how these materials are produced. And sometimes it means a lot to people, and sometimes people don't worry about it too much. So it's up to you in what you feel sits comfortably with your moral compass. And it's my job to just give you this information so that you can decide what you do with it. So lastly, I just want to touch a little bit on the sourcing. So when I'm looking for new crystals to put in the store and new minerals or gemstones, some of the things I take into consideration is the human aspect. So I want to make sure that my suppliers are working with mines that have good safety standards, equipment, so that, where necessary, there are, masks and helmets provided. There is absolutely no child labor being used. Some countries are awful with child labor practices. And of course, people are being paid fair wages. There is also the environmental aspect. So many of the crystals in the wellness community, they don't use large-scale industrial extraction like, for gold and cobalt and all of that kind of stuff, or use extensive chemical processing. So most of the time they are these small hand-dug pits, and those pits, once they've been exhausted, all the sand and the gravel that's been taken out has been put back and filled up, and not kind of destroying the environment. There's also the carbon footprint element. So most of the crystals in these small scale mining, the extraction is at the source. It's not like huge chunks of material has been taken to another location and then sorted and having the material extracted. From a transport point of view, especially when there's large ground to cover, sea freight is used as opposed to air freight. But of course, if you've been watching the news, as of this, January 2024, there are, ships being held in the Red Sea and things like that. So anything that you might have on a ship could be delayed. So you have to factor that into your supply and demand as well. Packaging, for me personally, all of the materials I use in your packaging are plastic free. There's very few times that I do use plastic, but all of the materials are recyclable, printed on water-based inks and things like that. And of course, crystals don't really have a shelf life, so it's not like food where you could have leftovers and you create waste. So that's at least another perk of having crystals. And then if you are new and getting started in crystals or want to know my top 5, I think, of course, it has to be rose quartz. Of course it is. This is a really fantastic stone for love in all shapes and sizes. Black tourmaline is fantastic for protection. It is one of my favorites. Hematite is another favorite for grounding and balance and reducing stress. These are great for meditation. They're quite heavy, so you can hold one in each hand and it gives you that really nice sense of being grounded. Amethyst is really great for protection as well. It's fantastic for sleep and insomnia, and also really great for like psychic abilities and intuition as well. And lastly, our friend clear quartz, our clean canvas that can be programmed for anything and everything and amplifies all of the other crystals. I think clear quartz is a must-have for any collection. So if you're missing some of these, do consider filling those gaps, because I think these are your must-haves. And that is it. We've come to the end of the Earth to Aura Foundations video. Thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed taking you on this journey. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. Please do join us on TikTok and Instagram, where we do regular updates. You're also welcome to email me at hello@selfandothers.co.uk if you have any questions about this video or about crystals and gemstones in general. I love hearing from you. I love answering your questions. So please do feel free to reach out.